so somebody's in my seat, but in today's video, I want to show you the new Power BI desktop bridge and how we can use hooks to influence how those commands run in Visual Studio Code. All right, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on all the new content and features we'll be rolling out in the coming weeks. And with that, Microsoft introduced a new set of skills that we can use with Power BI development. Now, in the past, I've shown you how to incorporate those skills files from a repo that was maintained by Rui Romano, who's a principal program manager at Microsoft. But now Microsoft in the last couple of weeks has made its own skills for Fabric, some of that based on Rui's work, but it's been collaborative. But also it's now available and supported on Microsoft's GitHub repo. So what I want to show you today is some things that you can do to influence how these skills files interact with your system with something called hooks. Hooks allow us to control what agents are executing on our machines. And I want to talk about maybe a pet peeve of mine that comes with these skills files, at least the version that you're seeing today in July of 2026. That as a JavaScript developer, it irks me, and I want to show you how you can use hook files to redirect the agent, so to speak, when it's using these skills files to work with Power BI. So with that, let me show you on my screen. I've got the skills for Fabric. This is where the skills files live. And I've got my Power BI report, and I've got it living in my Power BI project format. If you're unfamiliar with this, I would recommend looking at part 1 and part 2 of my AI-enabled Power BI developer series. We go over how to set this up. One of the cool things with some of the recent advances in GitHub Copilot is now when I'm working in the chat session, I can actually go to install plugins. And I can say, you know, all these skills files that I have up here that Microsoft's providing, I want to import them into my project, or at least in my desktop, so I can work with it when I'm working with Power BI. And so you can actually install from that URL, copy and paste it. And once I hit enter, I can either choose the trust. Now, I'm not going to go further from this because I've already installed it, but you can pick the skills files here. The one I'm going to pick is the Power BI authoring. You could pick all of them. You could pick some of them. And then once they've been enabled or imported, hit escape, you'll see it enabled here. So now the skills files for authoring, semantic model updates, how to work with DAX measures, all that has been brought into my Visual Studio Code experience. Now, one of the things that they introduced that if you've been watching this series, I usually would have to tell you to do is if it's making updates to the report, you would have to close down your Power BI desktop file and open it back up. Well, Microsoft has started to introduce features to avoid that, kind of have hot reloading. So if you're familiar with JavaScript development, this is something that has been around for a number of years. But they've integrated that now, it's in a preview status, but they've integrated that now into Power BI in the June release. One of the things you have to do to enable it is if I go to File, Options and Settings, Options, let's have this load. I go to Preview Features. There's this one that you're going to have to check. Enable external tool access to Power BI desktop through secure local APIs. The other word for this is desktop bridge or the authoring CLI. What Microsoft has done now is desktop, if you click this button, open, close down Power BI Desktop, open it back up, this preview feature will be enabled. And these APIs can now interact with Power BI Desktop in order to do that refreshing of the page. So if I ask Power BI Desktop to update a bar chart or create a new tab, I don't have to close down Power BI Desktop and open it back up in order for me to see those changes. I can ask it to reload. Now, looking behind the scenes, the way that it is doing that is these skills files have instructions to load 2 new CLIs that Microsoft has registered in NPM, which is a Node packet manager. So you're going to need Node to do this. Some of my other videos, Node has become a key piece that you're just going to have installed. It's free to install. But you'll notice that we've got a Power BI Desktop Bridge CLI. The skills files actually have instructions for installing these. And this allows the agent in the skills files to interact with Power BI Desktop to find out what process ID is running the local version of Power BI Desktop, how to take screenshots of it, and how to reload it. It also introduces the report authoring CLI that has stuff about validating and updating and formatting aspects of PBIR. So these are 2 new CLIs that Microsoft has introduced. So when you're working with these new skill files, it actually tries to install these Node packages on your machine. Now, for me, this is something that clues me into like, how is it installing? And you can see that at least in the current version, it is running what we call the -G, that's global. Now, if any of you have been working with JavaScript or Python, you see global install and you immediately go, oh, no. I want it to just be installed and I have it versioned for my workspace. In other words, if I don't want a version of the CLI in global space possibly polluting or being in conflict with what I am doing in my project. And that's why in Python we have virtual environments. That's why in NPM we have packages so that for our project and source control, we can keep what version of that node package we're running. Now, as of July 2026, we're looking at this version or the skills files instructs NPM to install it at the global. Now, there's a bunch of reasons from that I've just kind of gone over. The other reason I don't necessarily like having it installed in the global is I like to control from a admin perspective. I don't want it installed in global or updating path. I want it to be within the scope of the workspace. I also don't want to run into security issues that maybe the global has some sort of vulnerability and then I need to back out the global version and then that has downstream effects on the development experience for anybody working on those machines or those virtual desktops. I like to keep everything kind of local and I can run those updates and kind of control those updates. This is where the concept of hooks come in. Hooks allow you to say, you know what, when that skills file goes npm install g, let's do it locally. I'm going to redirect you. Now, my Visual Studio Code and GitHub Copilot introduced agent hooks in the last couple of months. And this allows us to say, anytime there's a command, especially npm, I want to run a script that either logs it or redirects it or rewrites it or denies it. So hooks help you not only when you're in an agent session locally, but if you're running an agent through the CLI, these hooks kind of allow you kind of give guidelines and steer the agents in the right direction so that either it's not running a command that it shouldn't, or it's running a command that adheres to the way we want to operate it. Now, I know many of you probably going, well, why don't you just update the skills file? Well, if I'm relying on Microsoft to maintain the skills file to update it, anytime I have somebody using that plugin, the new updates might overwrite those changes. So hook files kind of always stay persistent and keep in policy. So what does that look like? Well, in my project here, I've got a GitHub hooks folder, and in it is a JSON file. And that JSON file has a hook with an attribute for pre-tool use. Basically what this tells GitHub Copilot is before you run any tool command, which in this case would be like an npm install, I want you to run this script. And this is a JavaScript that I will share on Gist that you can use that redirects the npm install and also redirects any time that you issue the CLI commands so that it notices it needs to run it with the local version of the install. And this JavaScript program goes in and checks to see if it's trying to install globally. And if so, go ahead and initialize npm to run a package locally and then run it for development. So don't set up global cache, just set it up locally. And then the other pattern I have is if I want to run something like Power BI Desktop, make sure that you prefix it with npx so that it is running using the local version that's isolated to my workspace right here. All right, so I will share that. I don't want to go through the whole JavaScript, but the idea of hooks is not only powerful for what you're trying to do here, but any time that you're working with agents that might be running commands, you can have pre-tool use short circuit aspects of those commands. There is a great tool called RTK that will take commands and take the verbosity, take the wordiness of the text and shrink it down so you're using less tokens. There's a lot of things you can do with hooks that can help maintain token management, maintain policy. This is just an example of one in which, for my peace of mind, I like making sure that when I'm working in Power BI and I want to run something with Node, it's going to use my local package manager in my workspace and not pollute my global cache. So what does this look like now? Well, I have made sure that I have the Power BI modeling MCP installed. So that should be installed already. Actually, I don't think I need that. I'm sorry. It is installed. I'm sorry. I have it installed. You can see it right here. I have it installed. I also have the skills file added and then the hooks running. When I go to this sample model, I'm just going to do a simple thing. I'm going to ask it duplicate page 1 and reload. So I'm going to type in connect to sample model, duplicate page 1, and reload. Depending on the type of model you're using, sometimes reload will be picked up in the skills. So I just like asking it to do it to help illustrate the point here with what hooks are doing. Now, at this point, if I'm wanting to see if this hook is running, I can click up here and go to show agent debug logs. So I'm going to click on that while this is running. And you can see if I go here that it is keeping track of the tokens. I can view the log. It looks like it found my hook there. There's a lot of good information around here. Now, at this point, it noticed, all right, I need to install, I was trying to run the G, but I need to install the bridge and the CLI locally. So I'm going to hit allow. And you see the terminal it says terminal was blocked. That means that the hook said, you know what, do this instead. And so at this point, if I'm looking to the right here, package.json starts showing up. That's because it's installing the version of the CLI, the bridge CLI, and that on the local versions here. And you can see that that's registered. It also is going to create a node modules folder. So that way it can execute the CLIs locally. And if you're working in your Git version, just make sure node modules is set to ignore, which it is here. That way your repo doesn't get polluted with a bunch of node module files and it just takes up a lot of memory. It's best not to keep that in the repository. The package.json file is what really tells, anytime it runs an npm install, what versions of the tools I want you to run. All right, so next thing here, it's doing npm desktop status. So at this point, it's looking to see which versions of the process IDs are available to connect to sample model. It's going to duplicate the page. And this is all driven by the skills files at this point. Needs to create a unique ID for the page. Going to copy it. Now I don't have auto approve set up. I just want to show you this is going to ask me every time it wants to make file changes. Am I okay with that? All right, so it is running npx Power BI report author validate. Now, normally what it would have done is just run Power BI report author, and that would have tried to use the global. I've told it, when it tried to run that, put prefix it with npx, so we're running this locally. All right, the validation may have found a duplicate in the filter ID, so it's fixing that. This is all stuff in PBIR. This is what's also really nice about these new CLIs, is it can take care of some of the nuances with the JSON that normally you would have to figure out with the agent yourself. Okay, and then it's running validation again. And at this point, it's running it wants to ask, can I run the reload? Now, notice duplicate's not there because it made changes to the JSON files in PBR, but it hasn't done the reload yet. This is where the CLI, normally I'd have to close down Power BI Desktop and open it back up. Now, if I hit allow, it says it was successful. It's going to check the status. Now if I go back here, notice page 1 copy. It's been copied. Did that for me. That was the reload. I didn't have to close down Power BI Desktop. This is pretty cool. So there's a lot you can do with this, but what I wanted to illustrate is hooks are something that if you're working with teams and you need to add policies on, this is an important thing. All right, so I hope you learned something today. What we went over was the introduction of the desktop bridge feature in Power BI, so we can hot reload the Power BI reports as the agent's making changes to it. I showed you how that's accomplished with the Fabric AI skills, and how hooks can influence how these commands, specifically with the CLI for desktop bridge and for authoring, can be redirected so that we can meet policy. Now in this case, what I showed you was that I want to make sure that the installs for the node packages happen at the workspace level and not the global level. Now I'll share the hook file and the JSON file with you on Git, and in future videos we'll dive more into GitHub hooks and different aspects. But this is a really important feature, especially if you're trying to manage teams on virtual desktops and restricted environments. Hooks can help kind of regulate how things can execute and avoid issues. So with that, until the next episode, take care.